Hello everyone. Oh, thank you for coming along. For those of you who are lucky enough to have a white bag on your seat, just be reassured they're not plastic, they're actually made of a potato. Okay, they're potato starch bags, they will biodegrade. So if you're lucky enough to get a bag, if you leave it outside in the sunshine for 6 weeks, you'll find that it disappears, it evaporates. Anyway, let me introduce myself. I'm Neil McClements, I'm CEO of Magenta. We're a display retargeting and display prospecting specialist business. We're based here in the UK. We have offices across Europe, and a little bit later this year we will also be opening up in the US. Now, I'm not quite sure why you guys have come along. You've probably got your own sort of interests, your own ideas, things that you want to try and get out of this session. I've tried to make this quite sort of case study rich, so I'm going to rattle through loads and loads of case studies. If you want a copy of the slides, at the end, you'll see there's an email address. Just send us an email. We can send you a copy of the slides. So don't worry too much about keeping track with pen and paper. And I'm hoping if we do this quickly enough, there might be an opportunity for Q&A as well. Okay. So let me just ask you, who in the room has done some form of display retargeting or remarketing? Okay. Who hasn't? Who's thinking about it? Right, okay, very honest. Okay, so display retargeting is still a relatively immature business, I suppose, and you may actually be familiar with some of it yourselves as consumers. So one of the observations that people often make about display retargeting is that it's a bit like carpet bombing. So traditional display retargeters go out and they serve lots of ads to consumers as soon as they've visited your website, and then they're just followed around the internet forever after, okay? And we call that kind of carpet bombing approach. And as you'll discover a little bit further through the presentation, you'll understand why perhaps we actually don't advocate this. We actually, as a business, tend to get paid on a CPA, a percentage of sale. And if you do carpet bombing, it's great at generating clicks, but it's not very good at generating sales. And you get some really interesting feedback from consumers as well. So we have clients who've come to us and they've had feedback in their call centres where consumers have been so annoyed about the ads, they've actually rung up to complain about them. So it's a bit like email marketing was maybe sort of 5-6 years ago, where everybody got very excited about the ability to hit a button and to send lots of emails, and some people overdid it. And unfortunately in the industry at the moment, a lot of display retargeters overdo it. Okay? So this is something that we don't advocate because we don't believe it actually drives good results. However, if you're doing it well, you can get some pretty outstanding outcomes. So these are some statistics that we collated about a year ago of a number of different verticals across the Magenta platform. And what we were looking at was the conversion rate of those people that we brought back to the retailer's website versus the conversion rate that they were experiencing across all their other online channels. So that'd be things like paid search, possibly affiliates, email marketing, organic SEO, and so on and so forth. And as you can see from some of the numbers, actually, you're getting a 3 times uplift in the likelihood of someone actually coming back to your site and converting when they've been shown an appropriate display retargeting campaign. So if you get it right, if you get the balance just spot on, it can be very, very powerful. You don't annoy anybody and you can drive great sales. One of the other things that we're very focused on is actually looking at the value of those sales. So it's all well and good driving traffic, but if that traffic's not actually converting or converting at a high enough level, then really it's a kind of wasted opportunity. One of the things that we did about a year ago was we again looked at different verticals that we had on the platform, and we analysed the average order values of those people who had come through our platform versus organic or baseline activity. And as you can see, for some verticals, the uplift is quite dramatic. So if you were lucky enough to be a retailer in the fashion and jewellery vertical, you were typically seeing at that point in time almost 60% uplift in your basket value. Now, for most retailers, particularly given the current economic climate, that's a really, really, really powerful thing. Okay? Not only are you getting 3 times as many coming back and buying from you, but when they buy from you, they're buying at a higher order value. So it can be very, very powerful. Let's just talk a little bit about click-through rates. I mean, we get some good click-through rates, but they're not the thing that we really focus on. I'll explain a little bit more in a moment or two. But this is one of our clients in the jewellery vertical. These guys are they produce gold that's made out of gold rings that's made out of gold from a Welsh mine. And within 2 weeks of launching their campaigns, we were achieving click-through rates averaging around 1.25%, which is really quite high. If you compare that to typical display advertising, which is the sort of standard banners or standard runner network activity, the click-through rates there are actually quite poor. And a lot of people look at display advertising and they ask the question, should we really be doing it? Because actually, if we're only going to get 0.09% click-through rate, what's the point? And we would agree with that. But interestingly, within our platform, we have the ability to track people's engagement with the ads. So not just people clicking on them, but actually people moving their mouse over a product, or actually scrolling through a product carousel, or interacting with the ad, for example, by expanding it or by playing a video within the ad. And what's interesting is you find that people who engage with the ads often are the people that you really want to be following up with, because they're the most valuable cohort. And for these guys, within those 2 weeks, the engagement rate of those ads was almost 2/3. So 2/3 of the ads that we served, someone was interacting with them. Okay? So it's not simply a matter of just driving clicks. Clicks are easy to generate, but clicks fundamentally aren't the real message. Clicks don't really drive sales. So how do we do it? It's really about relevance for the consumer. I mean, we're all consumers ourselves, and when you're out and about on the internet, I'm sure, like me, you find that there's an awful lot of advertising there. Some of it's not particularly interesting, some of it's kind of bizarre because you wonder why on earth someone's showing it to you. But if you're going to do this type of activity, it's really important to focus on relevance for the consumer. If you do that, a lot of good things happen. But unfortunately, relevance doesn't just happen. You actually have to work at it. So just putting together some very nice banners and running them actually isn't sufficient. Okay, consumers are pretty smart. Consumers are switched on. So what they're expecting is something which is actually dynamic and personalised to them. So if you're just going to run a standard static banner, you may find the outcomes are actually quite disappointing. And it's really getting this personalisation into the marketing which really actually drives a lot of the value. There's various other things that traditional retargeters do that often people find annoying. Like, has anyone here ever bought something from a website and then been followed around the internet by the thing they just bought? Yeah, it's happened to me. Yeah, that's really dumb. Why do we do that? Right? If I've just bought a pair of Wellingtons, am I going to buy another pair tomorrow? Probably not. And people find that a little bit creepy, and that's where a lot of the pushback comes from consumers with this type of technology. One of the things that we're very proud of is actually when people work with us, we actually sit them down, we explain to them as clients that actually you shouldn't really want to try and serve as many ads as possible. You want to serve the right amount, and that's done using something called frequency capping. And if you get the balance just right, you get much, much better results. So rather than just deluging people or carpet bombing people with ads, a bit like spamming them with email, if you do something that's actually considered at the right point in time, in the right places, consumers will find that relevant and they will convert. One of the key things is actually be nice about it as well. Okay, there's lots of ways of being nice, and I'll talk about that a bit more after the session. So let me just sort of turn to a few tips. So I'm going to focus on 5 different areas. And what we're going to try and do is illustrate these tips with case studies. So hopefully this will all kind of make sense. I'm going to rattle through them quite quickly, but let me just give you an example. So when you're actually marketing to people, you really don't want to be just carpet bombing everybody or just spamming everybody. You want to be focused on those people who are actually much more likely to buy. Possibly they're going to buy frequently. And actually, if they're going to buy, you want them really to spend a bit more with you than would otherwise be the case. So for all of these people that you have coming through your website, there's actually a certain number of them who are really attractive to market to, and they need special attention. You might well decide you want to market to everybody, but focusing on those people where you're going to drive regular purchases or purchases at higher average order value, that can really transform your bottom line. So those are the people that are really worth following up with. What we do on the Magenta platform is we optimize for engagement. So we're not interested specifically in people clicking on ads. Anyone can click on an ad. It doesn't mean they're going to buy anything. But what we've found is that statistically there's a much, much stronger correlation between those people who engage with an ad and those people who buy. And this is some data which we're publishing today. This was taken off the platform for the month of January, so this is relatively recent data. And what we did was we did an analysis of the propensity to convert. In other words, the likelihood of someone actually buying something from one of our clients. Okay? And as you can see in the first chart on the left-hand side, you get a certain amount of conversion from people who click on ads. You do, right? Fair enough. But you get much more conversion from people who engage with them. And that maybe that doesn't come as a great surprise if you think about it, because people who are engaging with your ads are actually showing a lot of intent. They're actually interacting with your ad because there's something there that's interesting them. But a lot of the focus then comes on building creative that's actually dynamic and actually engages the consumer. What we also did at the end of the month was we looked at the average order values. So again, for most of our clients, and we have about 100 clients on the platform at the moment, this is one of the key statistics that they follow, okay? So everybody in marketing land is looking at the average order value for different marketing channels, and they look very, very carefully at how different channels are performing. So we've done that across our platform as well. So you can see that you get a certain amount of order value off your typical clicker, okay? But you get more, on average, from people who are engaging with the ads, okay? So it's not simply about clicks, it's about engagement. And if you're working with a display retargeter who doesn't support engagement tracking, then you're typically missing out. You're leaving money on the table, okay? Because these are the people who are actually much more likely to convert, and when they do, they're likely to spend more. So let's have a look at an example. So this is something we did for Club Med, well-known travel business. Unfortunately, these examples are all sort of PowerPoint, so they're static. In reality, they're all animated. This nice square medium rectangle in the middle, you get different sort of resorts spinning across the screen like a sort of Polaroid. And what we were doing there was we were actually optimizing the campaigns in real time. So if somebody interacts with a particular resort in one of the ads, we detect that. All of the ads have their own analytics built into them, and we start pushing similar resorts into the ad. So the next time the consumer sees the ad, it's not simply about stuff that they may have just seen on Club Med's website. We're actually offering them other resorts, and we're doing a little bit of a promotional sell as well. As you'll notice if you look at these, a lot of the ads themselves are also bringing in promotions as well, and that's really to get people to come off the fence. Okay, a lot of consumers will see these things on the web and they'll kind of shrug their shoulders. But if you're actually doing something which is dynamic and personalised to the individual, and you're giving them a promotional incentive at the same time, often that will convert very well. So that's just one example of trying to be relevant to the consumer. Has anybody here tried doing retargeting or remarketing with AdWords? Yeah? How's it going? Good? Excellent. Right. We've done a few split tests for clients because people often, they start out with AdWords, they give it a go. It's a great way of just trying a few things and seeing how they develop. But what we found consistently across the board is that when you're running retargeting and prospecting campaigns, if you dynamically personalise the ad, you get much, much better performance. So here's an example. This is a client of ours. Last summer, they asked us to run some very nice promotional branded banner ads for them, okay? And this is an example of one of them. It's an absolutely beautiful ad. If you were to look at that on a high-definition screen, you would see the thread count in the fabric. It's absolutely beautiful. It's got a nice, strong, clear call to action, and it takes you back to the home page. So when we saw this, we said, well, that's not going to perform very well. And the client was a little bit unhappy about that because it's a beautiful ad, so it must perform, right? So what we did was we ran a split test, and we ran it in parallel with one of our IntelliAds. Now, in IntelliAd, these are normally animated, and within them you'll have a series of products which we have statistically calculated you're most likely to be interested in at that point in time. And what we also did for these was we brought in product reviews, and we did that in real time. So there was a little bit of complexity behind the scenes because for those of you who work with product review providers, I'm sure you're familiar, you often get consumers who will give you like a 5 out of 5 rating, and then they'll slag you off in the comments, right? So then people find that they've got to go through and weed out the product reviews. Our platform will do that automatically, and we do something called sentiment analysis. So we're actually reading the text using the computer to work out is that broadly positive or not. And if it is, we'll run it against the product within the unit. Okay? So very different styles of creative. Okay, so how did it turn out? Kind of interesting. Okay? Client not very happy, funnily enough. So the creative they produced on the left-hand side had a click-through rate that was actually a little bit worse than the average across the internet, okay? And they drove no sales. There was not one single sale came through that campaign over the period that we were running it. On the other hand, the dynamically personalised ads, we had quite a high click-through rate, we had a reasonable engagement rate, and we sold a lot of product. Okay, so it's not simply about how good or elegant the ads are. Actually, there's quite a bit of science behind it as well. So personalisation, if that's the way to do things, if that's how you're going to drive revenue, how do you do personalisation? Well, there's lots of different ways of doing personalisation. Here's an example of something we've been doing with Mazda. What we've basically been doing is trying to drive, if you'll excuse the pun, consumers to actually go and register for a test drive or to get their car valued in order to buy a used Mazda, okay? And we've been doing that for dealerships across the UK for Mazda themselves. And what we were doing here was actually, rather than just showing people cars that they'd actually looked at on the Mazda dealers' websites, we actually had some algorithms that were looking at the behaviour of that consumer as they were moving around the used car site and actually working out what kind of vehicles were they actually interested in. Because sometimes people are very, very explicit about what they want, and they've got a very laser-focused idea about what they want to do and what they want to buy. Sometimes people are a little bit more vague, and they kind of bumble around a little bit, but you still want to try and get them to the point where they actually feel they can convert. So this is something we're doing with Mazda in order to make it even more interesting for the consumer. If you're going to buy a car, you might travel maybe 50 or 60 miles to go and have a look at a car and maybe do a test drive. So if you live in London, you'll probably go a little bit further out, up to Milton Keynes maybe to actually have a test drive. You're not going to go to Edinburgh, right? Because it's just miles away. So the ads themselves are also geo-localized, so that what we were doing was actually showing not only vehicles that we thought the consumer was most likely to be interested in, but also vehicles that were available on forecourts within a 50-mile radius of the consumer. So in this example here, we've got someone sitting in Birmingham, and a 50-mile radius actually is quite a reasonable proportion of the Midlands. But that's how we get people onto the forecourt. It's not about just showing people ads of stuff that they looked at. You've got to be much, much smarter than that. Here's another example. You may actually see this one when you're out and about on the web this week. If you go to Furniture Village, you'll probably get tagged by us, and you may see some of these ads. They've got a sale on at the moment, but the sale ends on Sunday. So what we're doing is actually, for those people who have recently visited the site in the last week or 2 weeks, we're actually running these ads and showing them with a little countdown, okay? So the little countdown that runs at the top there, every second the ad's on screen, it's counting down, okay? These perform incredibly well, right? Because if you're in the mindset of buying a sofa as a consumer, you may have gone to a Furniture Village store, you might have jumped up and down on it, squished the cushions a bit. You might then have gone to the website to have a look at the different fabric options because it was just more convenient than talking to a salesperson. You're probably interested in the sofa, but it's not one of those things that you're just going to go out and buy, because you're probably going to spend maybe £800-900, maybe more on it. So you need to be reminded that actually the sale is on, but actually it ends on Sunday. And this is one way of doing it. And this is performing incredibly well for Furniture Village. We get great engagement rates and also, interestingly, great click-through rates as well. It's driving sales, okay? So you won't see these after next week because the sale ends on Sunday. So if you're in the market for a sofa, get down to Furniture Village before it's too late. Let me show you another example of something that we can do. So rather than just focusing on retargeting, which is really about sort of marketing to people who've been to your website, there's also a huge universe of people who have never been to your website, okay? Now, unfortunately, most of those people are actually unlikely to buy from you, okay? They're not interested in your product, they're not interested in your pricing, they're just not interested, okay? But using real-time prospecting techniques combined with this type of countdown creative, you can actually stimulate people to come back to your site if they've already visited, and if they haven't visited the site, to actually bring them there in the first place, okay? Now again, this doesn't work particularly well if you've just got static banners, because that's just standard run-of-network advertising. So with these campaigns, and this is for Red 5, they're a sort of gadget shop, they're a high street chain. What we also do is we have different product selection algorithms. So one of them is focusing on real-time bestsellers. So what are the products that people who do visit the site actually buying now, right? So coming up to Christmas when we were doing this, you were getting some very interesting last-minute stocking filler type purchases. At the beginning of January, the types of products people were buying were very, very different. Okay, it's a seasonal thing, yeah? We also have the ability to run product recommendation algorithms which actually stimulate those impulse buys. So if you look at the example on the right-hand side, those Russian dolls, if you look at the price point, that actually falls within a lot of UK consumers' kind of impulse buy zone, right? So you see it, you may like it, it might be good for your partner, you might want to stick it in a Christmas stocking or whatever, we will recommend those products. And there's a number of different products that run within each of these units. Now, these particular campaigns are actually running at the moment on a Friday for 2 hours every day in order to drive people to the site. They run a flash sale every Friday. So using these types of prospecting techniques, you can actually gather up consumers who've never been to the site, but do it efficiently and actually do it in a way where it actually drives ROI. Because traditional ways of doing this are actually very, very expensive and often quite error-prone. Here's another angle for you, location. We saw a simple example of this with Mazda, but this is something we've been doing for RatedPeople.com. You may have seen some of their press adverts recently. They're a sort of marketplace for builders and electricians. This is not one of our ads, okay? All the other ads you see today are ads. This is not one of ours. It's actually competitors. That's okay. You know, it's got the brand on it. It's got a call to action, post your job, and it will show you those tradespeople that you've been looking at most recently. So if you go to RatedPeople.com and have a look at heating engineers, this thing will pop up and say heating engineers, okay? So that's a form of personalisation, but is it really enough? So let me show you what we did. We thought we'd do something a little bit more engaging. So these particular ads have got a lot of things going on. So they've got, again, they're animated. They've got a number of different tradespeople that would be available within a single unit. What we've done is we've actually taken a screenshot of this from someone living in Leamington Spa, okay? And this person happened to have shown an interest in gardeners, okay? So what we've done is we've actually gone to Rated People and we said, how many gardeners are there within a 20-mile radius of Leamington Spa? It's 20, as it happens, yeah? And we've also pulled in reviews of those tradespeople in real time, and we've done sentiment analysis on them. So Rated People can have their tradespeople reviews set up on the website. We go and pick them up, bring them into the ads in real time, and these perform incredibly well because consumers go, actually, I was interested in gardeners. I didn't realise there were that many available on Rated People. There's at least 20. That's probably more than enough for my purposes. And actually, here's the reviews of those 20 gardeners. Yeah? So adding value to the consumer on the web makes the ads more relevant, drives better conversion. Okay? So this is my final tip. Marketers love to test things. So do we. Test. What do I mean by that? Well, there's lots of different ways of testing things. So as I've shown you some examples, we've been able to run split tests where we're comparing the performance of our Intelli ads against static banner ads. But also, people will often say, well, you know, if you're going to do this type of retargeting activity, those people were going to come back anyway, right? So those consumers that I brought to my website through my lovely paid search campaign that's cost me maybe £30,000 this month, they were going to come back anyway, right? So we've got a split test capability where we can actually measure it, okay? And what's interesting is actually it varies by merchant, and it also varies with season and a bunch of other factors. So the only real way of actually doing this is actually to run an automated split test. And the way that we do that is we run two different cohorts. So what we'll do is we'll have 80% of the visitors to a site will go into a group that will receive our Intelli ads, and 20% will receive what's called a public service ad or a dummy or a branded ad, okay? And then we leave the campaigns running with exactly the same settings for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it is. And at the end of that period, we see how many conversions came through those ads. Let me show you an example of some results from one of our publishing clients. So Dennis Publishing, they're a well-known publishing group. They produce a lot of their own titles, but they also sell other people's magazine subscriptions. And we ran a test with them last year. Originally, we ran it for 2 weeks, and the results were so amazing, we didn't believe them. So we ran it for 3 months in the end, and this was the kind of outcome that we were achieving. So what we were finding was that those people who had been shown a Magenta Intelli ad, which had been dynamically personalised, were 5 times more likely to come back and buy something. 5 times more likely. So that sounds pretty good, you know. It's worthwhile doing this activity, okay? Then we had a look and we saw what the value of those conversions was. So there was, to be fair, some conversion that came back from a small minority of people who had the dummy ads. Okay, there was a small amount of conversion. But when you look at the difference in the order values, it's astonishing. So 5 times more likely to convert, at a 3 times higher basket value. It's pretty profound. And that makes a tremendous difference. If you're an online retailer or multi-channel retailer, those kinds of results are actually really worth working at because they can really transform your bottom line. We've got a case study put together. Some of you have already got a copy on the seat. If you'd like a copy of the case study, ping us an email at the end and we'll send you a copy of that. We do these split tests a lot. We do them for a lot of different merchants. We've done a bunch of them over the Christmas period. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to tell you who we did it for, but the results were of a similar order of magnitude. Okay? So when you get it right, when you're putting together relevant, dynamically personalised ads and showing them to people in the right place, at the right time, at the right frequency, you can deliver tremendous results. Okay? So those are all the case studies I want to run through now. I think we might have 2 or 3 minutes for questions. If you want a copy of the slides, send us an email. We will send you a copy of the deck. There is a roving mic. Who's... Someone at the back.
Thank you very much for that. What's the technology behind the tele ads?
In what sense?
So is it driven by JavaScript or is it HTML5?
So we have so how are the ads built? Is that the question? So we have an IntelliAd framework that allows us to do all of these things. We have a framework that works for Flash, which is great for desktop machines, and we also have one for HTML5. So for people who are maybe interacting with a website on their iPad, which actually for Furniture Village is very common, a lot of people of an evening will sit down with their partner with the telly on, flip open the iPad and actually start to have a look around. We can run ads on a behavioural, personalised basis on HTML5 capable devices as well.
Great, thank you.
Any more questions? Someone at the back.
How do you get around the problem of cookie deletion?
We don't use cookies.
Really?
Yeah, so we made a decision a couple of years ago, actually, when we designed the platform, that cookies are they're ubiquitous, but they do come with their own challenges, right? And I think probably you're aware of this perhaps more than most people, because typically in the UK market, a cookie will be around on someone's computer or device for about 2 to 3 weeks. I think if you have a look, Comscore did a good report last January that showed that the majority of cookies actually disappear within 2 to 3 weeks in the UK market, and that's for all kinds of reasons, like consumer deletes their cookies deliberately, or they've got Norton antivirus that starts up at the weekend and trashes them. So we made a decision not to actually use cookies for our behavioural tracking. We use something called a device fingerprint. It's a proprietary technology within the Magenta platform, and what it allows us to do is actually to be able to observe anonymously consumer behaviour over very long periods of time. So we introduced this originally about 17 months ago, and we have consumers who we have been observing their behaviour every day for 17 months. Now, crucially, that does not mean that we're actually marketing to them every day, because that would be annoying. And if you annoy people, they don't buy things. And the majority of the clients who work with us, we work on a CPA basis. So if we annoy people, we don't get paid, the client doesn't make any sales, it's not good for anybody. So we don't ourselves actually rely on cookies for our behavioural tracking, which is something which I think is quite unique to us. I mean, a lot of people, when we talk to them about it, kind of, how does that work? There is a lot of technology behind it, but it's very, very effective. So we're able to track people over literally months and months and months. So it allows us to do things like, for example, Club Med. If you've booked your summer holiday, and a lot of people for Club Med actually sit down at Christmas with their families and they go, where are we going to go on holiday this summer? It's nice to be able to have a second bite of the cherry, maybe sort of August time when they come back, to say, how about a skiing trip, right? So if you're relying on a cookie, it's very, very difficult to do that with accuracy. Using IntelliMatch, which is our fingerprint technology, we're able to reach people over an extended period.
Just on that, how do you get off? How do you, so presumably you have some sort of privacy policy. How do I get away from you guys?
Yeah. So every single one of our ads in the top right-hand corner, there's a little eye icon. And what the eye icon does is it allows you click on that, you can opt out. We do not want to market to consumers who don't want to receive the advertising. We really don't. Because if you annoy people, they don't buy things, and we only get paid when there's a sale. So we provide an opt-out capability on every single ad that we run, and we have done for almost 2 years now. We also provide the ability for people to opt out from our clients' privacy policies. There's a little link there. And you can also, if you get really desperate, you can come to our website and you can opt out that way. Interestingly, opt-out rates themselves do vary a little bit, and we track them quite carefully because we think they're a good sign of whether we're getting the right balance or not. And what we find is actually there's quite a lot of people who will click on that little icon and opt out, and then they opt back in again 5 minutes later. Right? So it's almost like there's something there, I'll click it and see what happens. Nothing happens. They click, they opt back in again. Yeah? I think that's our time now. So thank you very much for coming along. If you've got any more questions, I'll be around outside for the next few minutes. Thank you very much.